Oh, you can sit down. Amen. Just to kind of set this up, just having Bishop Bonner, how many of you are blessed by that? Come on. That was just awesome. And John Tyson, just, wow, what a word, and how many of you guys would like a do-over? Come on, how many of you have seen, the redo buttons, the do-over buttons? And yet, if the reality is, if we just had a do-over button, some of us would do the same dumb thing again. Right? It's not just a do-over button. The thing that we need to realize and recognize, wherever we're at in life, because Lane and I, we want to kind of share a different kind of journey and different kind of story. But again, it's kind of this thing. Whenever I shared my testimony and from where I came from and from a life of sin and addiction and all kinds of stuff and very radical experience, transforming experience, and all that. And especially with young people, when I was a youth pastor, they would get wild about it. But I'd always say the greatest testimony is not one that I have, but one like Bishop has. To not have to endure and go through and that kind of brokenness and healing and restoration and all. And so my hopes is that now for the next few minutes, that as we just share some of our story, that it captures maybe some others out there that are going, wow, I could never be that. I could never have that. I could, never do that. And again, I love what John said. You use what you've got. Start where you can. Do what you have. But let me also say this. Rather than a do-over, why not newness of life? Because that's what God has promised, that he makes all things new. And here's the cool thing about that word new. That word new is not a do-over. That word new means, from the Greek, that God lifts you to a new level of living life. That's newness of life that is promised as a part of our covenant as Christ followers. And so keep that in mind wherever you're at, because, whenever I look back at my journey in this, I was raised pretty confused. My parents, we were Christadelphian, which is, most people go, Christian what? It's kind of like Jehovah's Witness. And so very much from, a so-called Christian cult. And then there was the dysfunction that even with that kind of religious spirit in operation, my dad had some pretty strong demons, and he was a binge drinker, and alcoholism was a major problem. And sometimes he'd go for years and never touch a drop. Be awesome, great dad in so many ways, taught me so many wonderful things, and yet then something would trigger that. And boom, he'd be gone. Sometimes for months, we wouldn't know if he was alive or dead. And so we struggled a lot through those times. And in those times, I was the oldest. And so Mom immediately always turned to me, that I had to take care of stuff. So responsibilities fell. And so, but coming through that as a teenager, I completely rebelled. And so, and sometimes you start down a road that you never dreamed that road will take you to that place. And I began to do things that I never said I would do. And so from doing a little weed, pills, next thing you know, in my early 20s there, full blown into drugs and just the whole party life and all those kinds of things. And but there was something that was always eating at me. See, Lane, like I said, not Christian. And you're in high school, and come on, chasing girls was just the thing, right? And so with that, I had a relationship with Lane's mom, and she became pregnant. And so that was very, still unexpected in that. And tried to do the right thing, and it didn't last, with that relationship. And so, but even on the other side of that, with both of us moving on, going our own ways, I still always purposed to keep that relationship. And Lane was just a little bitty guy, during that time. And at 22 years old, I got saved. I got radically born again in my bedroom. Completely transformed, and I won't go into all of that, but it was to the point where every addiction, I'm talking every addiction, there was complete deliverance. I couldn't quit. I tell people my habits had habits. My addictions, they multiplied, they grew, and I'd try and quit this by doing this, and now I did that and this. And so it just wasn't working. And, two drug addicts moved in together to try and help each other try and get off drugs. Yeah, right. That didn't work. And so, but somehow I did believe in God. And I thought, okay, if anybody could help me, because I had friends in and out of rehabs and things, and they never got fixed, And so I did find myself in this place, going into my bedroom. Well, I'd come in, take a few bong hits, then go to my bedroom and have my Bible. Come on, Bible can really have great meaning, because let me just say, potheads are the greatest philosophers in the world. They have all the answers but never do anything. And so I'd go to the bedroom and I'd just read my Bible and pray. And over a course of about a week, I ended up completely, radically transformed, completely set free from all addictions. I didn't even cuss after that. I'm talking about raw power of God manifest, transformed. It's no behavior modification. I'm talking about true transformation. And so that happened in my life. Well, a lot of what drove that, I hated who I'd become in so many ways, because I knew that I was still supposed to be a dad. That still was eating on me. And so once becoming, now I didn't even realize what happened to me. It took me a bit to even get in church and find out, what actually had happened. I could never remember anybody witnessing to me, telling me about Jesus. So, but I determined, okay, even more so, that I've got to have this relationship with my son. And so really tried to do the best I could in that. His mom moved away with him, moved up here for a period of time, but every opportunity that I had, whether it was, his soccer games or different things, I came. Never missed, let me say this, guys, never missed a child support payment. Not even when I was jacked up, I didn't miss one. I just sold more stuff. Anyway. Hey, it's going to make my child support payment. And so there were things that were obviously still instilled in me that was generationally of certain values, though. Even though there was dysfunction, even though there was definitely, my life was a mess. And so, but God took that and then took me and began to really give me, all the direction and set me on destiny's course. And let me say this, destiny is not a destination. Destiny is your journey of faith in him. And so, but with that, so Lane and I had some separation in some years. She moved up north, went to Cincinnati, and so Lane didn't come back to actually live with us until he was in high school. And so we were forming that relationship right then. And at that same time, my oldest daughter was diagnosed with cancer. And she wasn't supposed to make it. And we had that fight and that battle. Thank God she's still, she's healed and remarkable young lady. But just to give you an idea of all of that. Now, I want to say this. And then I'm gonna pass it over here and let Lane share some from his perspective and where he's at in this, because in that struggle there was many times that I felt that where his mom was again, I was jacked up, messed up. If you're not living for Jesus, guess what you get? But now I'd become a Christian, and so now I wanted Lane, and it was a lot of struggle there, a lot of feelings like, okay, she's not able to care for him. She's in the bars and she's clubbing and she's doing all this partying and all this stuff. And I so desperately wanted to rescue him from that. And I was at kind of this pivotal moment of time. And in that place, I felt like that the Lord told me that if you do that, you could win that battle, but you're going to lose the fight. You're going to drive a wedge. You're going to create such opposition and so many problems. If I took her to court and sued and did all that, and I was gearing up for that. And he told me, he said, if you'll trust and give Lane to me, just as Moses was raised in Egypt and served me in his older years, said, I'll promise you that Lane will serve him. And so I did that. And when Lane moved back, I thought, okay, this was that opportunity. It didn't quite happen like that. It was some years later that God brought that fully back into a place of redemption and where we were able to really come together in our relationship. And from this point, it's been an incredible journey, and I'll maybe share some more on the other side of that. But I'd love for Lane to be able to share with you and kind of where he's at in that, because ultimately it was about me looking and developing and knowing that I had a heavenly Father that cared for me, that cared for him, and he knew best. And I got a word from God, and I acted on it. And I'm so grateful and so thankful that I did, because he's sitting here today serving the Lord.
Not because I sought it out or tried to work in the ministry or do any of those kinds of things, but sometimes in hindsight, when you can look back and see God's hand at work and really help you understand legacy on the backside, So how many of us, especially as teenagers or young people, ever thought about the word legacy? Ever thought about what's left behind and what that would look like and what you step into? And growing up in a dysfunction that so many of y'all may know already, where living in Ohio as a teenager, crucial teenage years, and I had a wonderful stepfather who eventually came into my life, but for some of that, only getting to really see my dad on summer breaks and Christmas breaks, spring break, and those kinds of things, and so interesting time growing up with a mom who was the Creaster, Christmas and Easter Baptist maybe, and then all of a sudden I'm thrown into the church world on holidays and in those times. So in the middle of my junior year, I leave my mom and move with my dad, and come back to Texas, and we're down in Lockhart where I was finishing high school, and so you finally think, and I can only imagine the hope that he would have had even more so than me, that, oh my goodness, like here's the opportunity, here's where for a father to have the opportunity to pour that kind of legacy concept into offspring, into a young man, and be able to build that. But then for us to face such a challenge where with my sisters and like a 6-year-old sister, 6-year-old who's fighting cancer. And so the challenge is still created, and I graduated high school and I run off to San Angelo. I'm gonna go to college, and I think I'm gonna get away. I think I'm gonna I'm just doing my own thing, nothing special, like so many of us do, especially in the college years. It's just time to figure it out. I'm just gonna party and hang out and college life and this and that. And I moved to San Angelo for college, and it was literally, so I moved there in August. In September, he moves there to become the senior pastor of the church there in San Angelo. Yeah, I'm sure God was laughing at least as much as y'all were right there. A sense of humor. And, in looking back, we think so much about legacy. And I heard Tim Tebow just say the other day in an interview where he said, inheritance is what you leave behind, and legacy is who you leave it with. What I also want to encourage so many of us today with is whether you're a father, you're a son, whether you have children or raising, or maybe you're in the position that your children are already adults and you feel like maybe some of those times have passed that we've discussed or heard about today, but who you leave it with, that it's not even bound to just offspring. It's not bound to blood. That legacy, when I got to do right at the beginning of COVID, literally the week before quarantine went down, and being a youth pastor for so many years, and then getting to do a wedding of 2 of my kids that were in my youth group up here in Weatherford area, and to be able to do that's legacy. But yet so much of that, as I look back, is still connected to my father. It's the values and the character that was instilled into me because of him. There's a lot more to the story of how I became an employee. As my father became my pastor, my boss, and my pastor, or my dad, I got it wrong. I've said it so many times, I got it wrong that time. But he served these 3 roles in my life, and there were times where I didn't always agree. And maybe even times where maybe I would question whether this was where I was supposed to be. But I knew the character and the quality of the man he was. That I never had permission from God to move on. And even if I didn't agree with decisions or styles or methods of how we did church or ministry or whatever it may have been, I knew that the quality of the character that was there was unmistakable. And I can never get away from that legacy. Could never move on from that.
Man, yeah, go ahead, let's thank God, So my wife and I, we just celebrated 37 years, and I've got 3 daughters as well, and they let me know early on as teenagers that they would never work for me. And even with Lane, I never pushed that. I never made that happen. I wanted them to really map out, because I knew what we had put in them. That at some point you got to trust God, that you've done your part and you've made those investments, you've done those things that you could do, and at some point in that, parents sometimes, we have terms. I've got charter schools with nearly 4,000 students, and kids are great. It's the parents that is our challenge. I mean, it's like, Lord. And especially if you meet a helicopter mama. There's terms that they give them, and where parents can't somehow understand the seasons of life, and where kids don't run the house, don't give all the direction and instruction on how we live or what we do or don't do when they're little. Too many parents allow their kids to make those decisions, even going to church or not. And we just weren't going to do that. But at the same time, as they start reaching a certain age, I always made sure that we were empowering enough to where in those transitional years that they were having room and opportunity to even fail. Now, you're giving advice, you're talking, you're doing, but at some point that starts shifting in that relationship. And then as they move into adulting, there is a book, Adulting. Some of you may need to use that, give that. And in adulting, that you help them learn responsibilities and what they're going to be allowed or not allowed. And so we felt like that we had to be intentional about moving through some of those processes and teaching them responsibility and what we were willing to do, even though we had capacity and we're blessed and we could have done more and done certain things. I wasn't going to do that. I had to work and earn and do certain things. And so I just made sure that was going to happen. Even today, even mentoring, I've got guys, that look to me and call me pastor, that are other pastors. And I help them with different things. But I also tell them that, listen, I can't carry, I've got multi-campuses, and so we have even those pastors that are campus guys. I share this on a regular basis. There are battles to be fought that you're going to have to fight. There are victories to be won that you're going to have to get that victory. There is a journey of faith that you have to have. And I can't live that and do that for you. And otherwise, you take away a certain strength from those next generations. You take away certain things that because I feel like I do have broad shoulders. I am a type A personality. I do have a lot of energy. Even as a kid, I thought sleep was a waste of time. And so I run on that, in that kind of pace. And some of my other staff, I had to learn early on that they could not run at the speed that I run. I had to give them room for that. Some guys, they'd kill themselves trying to keep up. And there's a grace on my life, and there was some of that. Now, I was out of bounds and dysfunctional in some ways and had to learn some of that lesson and come back around, live in margins and do certain things much more in a healthy fashion. But for younger generations, they need room in that. So with my girls now, all three of them, they work in our charter school, and they're amazing, and I'm grateful, for what God's done there. And they work in different areas. My daughter, Erica, that had cancer, she has got such a heart for those who are struggling, and she's our district diag and specialized. She's got so many certifications and stuff, got her master's in special education. She's amazing what she can do with kids with special needs. The middle daughter is in curriculum and instruction and technology and just rocking it. My youngest is, and all of them have their masters, but my youngest is actually been our business manager. And, this past year, nearly 4,000 students, 400 and some odd, or 500 and something employees just on the school side, $36 million, budget, and she runs all that. And so I'm very grateful for my kids. For Lane, I felt for where he's at. And again, those girls are married and they serve God and got great husbands and all that. But for Lane and my daughter-in-law, Becca, that's up here, even for them in this next place, we have really moved this to where even though it's under the same corporation, same mission, vision, values, all of those types of things, we're giving Lane much more opportunity to be able to follow God's leading and his journey and those types of things and pursue that, and still with counsel and guidance and all those kinds of things. But again, if he doesn't learn to take that on his own, and so guys, you got to do that. You know, you've got to see, how can we move through that? How can we do that? And maybe share on some of that. What was that like, stepping into kind of that next place of a church plant and not just being directly under?
Yeah, we are out of time. So if you'd like to take me to dinner, I'll tell you any other stories that you would like. But I'll finish probably maybe with this quote of what you do for yourself won't outlast you, but what you do for others will be your legacy. And I think even speaking for my sisters without them being here, and even for my wife, of our involvement in the thing that would often be considered Pastor Walt's legacy, the thing being the church and the school. But I think what we choose, and the fact that we've chosen the paths that we have, is because of the legacy of Pastor Walt doing for others. It's the church for others, it's the school for others, it's community, it's impact, it's being Jesus to the world. And what I would encourage you with is that each and every one of us, if what is in the hands of people is the legacy itself, then each and every one of us is the legacy of Jesus. Each and every one of us has a legacy to carry because of Jesus Christ. We are his church. We all have a mission and a responsibility and an opportunity, and we are the legacy of Jesus.